Men are on the surface. It's a single-handed S-class hunter. Actually, he is an alien who only wants to retire. Little Green Book is a magical civilization, the strongest wizard on the planet. But one day, he suddenly had an idea, that is to quit this shitty job. Because this is a society that provides free service, even if you work to death, you won't get a cent. What's even worse is, because of the advanced technology, they don't need to eat, drink, or sleep at all. On call 24 hours a day. Though, at a young age, he got the overtime poisoning. He can't even remember when was the last time he got off work on time, how much he wants to leave. But because of his great responsibility, cannot resign at will. And those big shots up there, in order to prevent him from escaping, even put restrictions on him. For example, when he tried to use teleportation, his head would be electrocuted. Even if he could escape, there is no hiding place on this planet. He also thought about killing his boss. Unfortunately, he couldn't attack people from the same planet at all. Not only that, he couldn't even commit suicide. And just when his mind was full of resignation, suddenly a flash of inspiration flashed through his mind. Although his body was imprisoned by magic, but his soul is free, because in this world, there is no magic to manipulate the soul at all. That is to say, as long as we give up on our bodies, we can just escape with our souls. Time passed by like this for 10 years. Xiaolu struggled every day between giving up and holding on. Finally, after countless repeated attempts, he completed the unique magic soul manipulation. He wanted to split his soul out and then escape to a planet where no one could find it. At the moment of his consciousness leaving his body, he couldn't help feeling overjoyed and successful. I succeeded. I really am. A genius can finally leave this shitty place. What are you bastards, going to do without me? With this kind of excitement in leaving his job, Xiaolu came to a blue planet deep in the universe. When he opened his eyes again, he had already become a human. From now on, he was the male protagonist, although he felt somewhat uncomfortable at first. Xiaolu was very satisfied with this result. He had successfully retired anyway, right? Next, he first felt the state of his body, and then he prepared to receive the original memories. In order to smoothly integrate into society in the future, he had to disguise himself so well that even this body's parents could not discover it. But the plan was perfect. The reality was disappointing. This body's memories were like fragments, intermittent, completely unable to be recalled. At the same time, he suddenly felt a severe pain in his abdomen. Waves of sour water kept gushing out from his stomach. Damn it, he didn't expect this body to have starved to death. Before coming here, he had only thought about finding a race with the highest intelligence, a body with the highest magic power, but he actually overlooked the current physical condition. This was a huge mistake. In order to survive, he had to hurry up and eat something to fill his belly first. So he had no choice but to struggle to get up and head outside. And then he saw sunlight for the first time. Most of the surface of his hometown was liquid. A dark place without sunlight, and now a colorful world just appeared before his eyes. Whether it's the warm sunshine or the refreshing air, all fascinated him. He really wanted to feel it once more, if he wasn't starving to death now. However, why is there nothing to eat around? No, if it goes on like this, I will really starve to death. Just that. The male protagonist finally discovered something to eat. The little one is not big, but the problem is that this is not the time to be picky. So Xiaoking was caught with a stunned face, then got closer and closer to a big mouth. At this critical moment, a child passed by the male protagonist. Looking at the stuff in the child's mouth, the male protagonist instantly felt that the Xiaoking in his hand was not tempting anymore. He threw it aside casually. So now, there is an important question. Should I rob or not? Whatever, let's follow him first. So the male protagonist followed him all the way. The child also found someone following him all the time. He turned around and saw. Then he was frightened by the other party. The next moment, he turned around and ran without hesitation, ignoring the male protagonist's request to wait. In the end, the child escaped smoothly with his agility. The male protagonist didn't know where he had followed, but it's okay. There are several ornamental plants here, although it doesn't look like it can be eaten. But the male protagonist can't control so much anymore. But just then, there was a sudden loud noise from afar, accompanied by a child's scream. It was the little boy. Although he didn't know what had happened, the male protagonist decided to go and have a look, and at this time, the little boy was trembling all over and looking ahead because a giant bird was standing in front of him. Monster. It was the first time the man had seen a woman in his life, because she was an alien who had just crossed over. Just now, the male protagonist heard a scream, so he followed the sound. He saw a giant bird chasing the little boy. Unexpectedly, on the first day on Earth, he saw such a monster on the street. What a shitty world this is. But soon the male protagonist changed his mind. In a way, this might be a good thing, because according to the residual memory of this body, birds are a delicious delicacy. A mere monster is nothing to a great mage, as long as he adapts to the magic power. Even conquering this planet will not be a problem. It was also at this time, he suddenly discovered there was a fluorescent glow surrounding his body. The feeling of being scanned all over the body is magic power. But what's the matter with this amount? Is it too much? The magic power of his hometown can only fill his feet. So this is extra here. It would be like you fell into a swimming pool. At this moment, the male protagonist felt that he had become stronger. In this place with abundant magic, he will be omnipotent. And just at this moment, the little kid ran in front of the male protagonist and asked him for help. For a great wizard, this kind of thing, it's a piece of cake. However, the male protagonist has one condition, that is to get the thing from the little kid's hand. Although the little kid was reluctant, but hearing the movements behind him, he instantly distinguished the importance. Here you are. Please save me. The transaction is complete. The male protagonist asked the little boy to hide behind him and then get into position, wanting to separate the monster's flesh and bones with a wave of his hand. As a result, nothing happened after waiting for a long time. At this moment, the kid looked at the main character like he was an idiot. But the protagonist is also somewhat suspicious of this. What's the matter? Is it because you are new here? Are you too nervous? Seeing the male protagonist is strong outside, the kid brother who saw that something was wrong lost no time in making himself scarce. And the male lead is still trying various attempts. Explosion and flame energy and all kinds of magic have been tested. In the end, only one conclusion could be drawn. This body unexpectedly can't use magic. The main character, who realized reality, started to flee in panic. He called for help as he ran. It's a pity that even though he was in the middle of the street, there wasn't a single person who could help, and for some unknown reason, the monster was just fixated on him. The body that was already so hungry that it couldn't go on is now already at its limit. Seeing that he wouldn't be able to outrun the other party on the road, the male lead decisively changed direction, and the monster also didn't want to be left behind. Same emergency braking steering. What's worse? The monster suddenly remembered that he can fly, looking at the huge bird that was swooping down from behind. The protagonist felt like he just entered day one of another world. He was going to die, and at this critical moment, his knee twisted. At this moment, he felt like he saw his grandmother. Right after, he was brought down due to the inertia and fell onto the ground, while the huge bird flew straight over his head. Then came a series of rollovers to its death. Finally, the bird's huge beak strongly crashed against the wall. The protagonist watched the feathers dancing in the sky, temporarily forgetting what had happened. Then he stepped forward to check, staring at the motionless, enormous body. Not can help but meditating. Could it be that he died from crashing against a wall? Is this guy an idiot? I really want to ask the scholars on Earth. How could such a stupid creature have evolved? However, now is not the time to think about these things. The male protagonist touched his already flattened stomach and drooled in exasperation. This bird should be edible, right? After all, we are all creatures from the same planet, and our physical compositions are about the same. However, before he could figure out how to eat it, he suddenly heard a sound behind him. The male protagonist turned his head and saw a capable and beautiful woman in a professional uniform appearing before his eyes. It turned out that the little kid had gone to seek help. Du Yuyan was a professional hunter, so he knows what the monster is. Facino killer. It is a bird living in desert areas, in the gate of space, with a speed comparable to that of a missile. Hunters below sea level are no match for him. So before there are a lot of casualties, he had to solve it as soon as possible. However, when he found here, this is the scene I saw. At this moment, he doubted his life. Did he solve it alone? Just then, Kid brother and a policeman also arrive. The policeman thanked the male protagonist for helping catch the monster. Du Yuyan squatted down to check the cause of the monster's death. It looks like it was killed in front. Could it be that this person is a hunter above sea level? The male protagonist doesn't care about anything else. The moment he saw Brother Kid, he had forgotten everything else. I saw him stretch out a hand, looking at each other seriously. Said you wouldn't have forgotten the agreement, would you? Hearing this, although the kid brother was reluctant, but still hand over the things in his hand to the male protagonist. The male protagonist drank it without hesitation. At this moment, he finally felt alive. Du Yuyan looked at the scene speechlessly. This is grabbing children's snacks. The man clearly solved the monster, but was almost invited to drink tea directly, just because he doesn't have a killing qualification certificate. Just now, Du Yuyan of the Hunter Association reached out to express her gratitude to the protagonist. Then the protagonist, without hesitation, reached out that hand covered in an unknown liquid and grasped it. Du Yuyan instantly felt herself get dirty. Not caring about manners or not, she directly pulled out a tissue and began to wipe her hand. Simultaneously, she had the other party show their hunter's license because she wanted to report to the association, but that thing the protagonist had never even heard of. So he randomly found an excuse, saying that he didn't have it on him right now. Hearing this, Xu Yuyan didn't say anything else. She had the other party give her his name. She would look it up in the hunter system. Who would have thought that the protagonist would have a guilty expression, simply because he didn't know the name of this body? Seeing his appearance, Xu Yuyan was silent for a moment, then asked the protagonist in disbelief, "Have you not registered as a hunter? Would you like me to check? You should know that without first registering, using your ability recklessly is a violation of the law." The protagonist completely didn't understand what she was saying, but he knew that things couldn't continue like this. So he lied, saying of course he had registered, but he had just forgotten his hunter's license at home. Following, he had her wait there and went home to retrieve it. Finished speaking without waiting for her reply, he immediately turned around and left. Simultaneously, he made a silent decision in his heart. From now on, he would never again take this path. The male Lee returned home. I managed to find my ID without any trouble. The hunter card could not be found anywhere. As he expected, the native hadn't registered. He also discovered some unknown objects in the house. And just then, he remembered Yuan was actually a chain smoker. He nearly passed out in anger. He must know smoking is a taboo for a magician, because magicians need to use their respiratory system to sense and absorb external magic power. So this kind of thing that damages their lungs is simply unimaginable to them. No wonder this body was unable to use magic. The host now regretted a little. Why didn't he think of it? Discarding the defective body. But he quickly cheered up again. After all, I escaped with great difficulty. Don't give up because of such a small thing. A joyous and fulfilling life is still waiting for you. And then just hours after he arrived on Earth, he was arrested. Because when he went outside again, he was starving to death. He finally followed a good smell and found a restaurant to fill his belly. And then he was arrested for dining and dashing. Luckily, a police officer recognized him as the hunter who had just defeated the monster, so he let him go. The main character was very grateful for the police officer's help. He bowed in thanks and was about to leave. But before he did it, the police officer handed him a flyer. Apparently, he saw that the main character hadn't registered as a hunter. He kindly told him to go to the Hunter Association, take a free awakening test. The protagonist didn't know what the awakening was, but from the other person's appearance, it should be common sense that all Earthlings know. So he decided to take a look. Then he remembered the original body had been here. It was just that the original body only awakened the lowest level F. Thinking of this, the protagonist felt as if it was out of the blue. And just when the protagonist was confused, suddenly, a voice interrupted. It was Zhu Yuyin who had returned to the association. She happened to see the protagonist, so she came to say hello. She wondered what the protagonist came for. She also wanted to look at the other party's hunter license. Only then did the protagonist remember he had just asked the other party to go back home to get the certificate. Fortunately, he could remember part of it. So the protagonist apologized to the other party and admitted that he had lied. In fact, he didn't have a hunter license. Zhu Yuyin was speechless. No wonder you didn't go back after waiting for you for so long. The protagonist explained. He had done the awakening registration. It was just that the level was too low, so he didn't apply for a hunter license. Zhu Yuyin was a little confused. The protagonist said with pride, I am F. Xuan Yuyin was shocked. How did you kill the Finch assassin? Then I heard the protagonist say, the stupid bird killed itself by hitting the wall. The answer was too bizarre. There was a moment of silence. It is not impossible. But how come Zhu Yuyin still doesn't quite believe it? After all, see the other party's eyes then? It's like watching the worms. This is not a F-class waste should have shown. But if he was lying, then it is why you have to hide yourself. You should know, generally do so are all molecules of danger. Does the person also don't understand? Zhu Yuyin finally grabbed smile said understand. You're lucky. Fikino killer is not working brain. Looking at each other with a fake smile on his face. The male protagonist instantly understands. The Earth people is to control facial muscles. Express feelings. This point that he must study hard. Then saw the male protagonist mouth slowly hooked. Yes, I am really lucky. The smile is full of criminal intent in every way. Zhu Yuyin was stunned. This guy definitely has a problem. The man merely smiled, but the woman on the opposite side was so scared that she nearly soared into the air. It turned out the male protagonist was imitating the girl. Just now, his smile was superficial. Zhu Yuyin felt that this guy had a problem. She should still leave first before saying anything, but before that, he took out a paper bill from his bosom and handed it to the male protagonist. Little Green, who had received a reward for the first time in his life, was very excited. Where did this kind person come from? But he was still curious. Zhu Yuyin explained. It turned out it was the body of the Fikino killer from just now. Who would have thought that this thing could be sold for money? The male protagonist's excited tears flowed from the corner of his mouth. He did not understand why that bird was so valuable. Was it because of its expensive feathers? What he did not know was that what he really valued was the magic box. A C-class magic box was worth 2 million. The male protagonist did not dare to not hear those words. He questioned why he only had 50,000. Hearing this, Shu and Yuyin's face was filled with helplessness. After all, the damage caused by fighting the demon was compensated under his name. If a certain person did not run away, he could have been exempted from Hunter's liabilities. That moment, the male protagonist felt a sharp pain in his chest. He apologized to the other party. And Zhu Yuyin seemed to have heard some incredible news. He turned around and left immediately. It's fine to talk while walking. Wishing you a delightful afternoon. Watching the other party leaving behind, The male lead could not help but clutch the banknotes in his hand. Unexpectedly, in his hometown, those guys are as annoying as a swarm of bugs. It's actually worth 2 million, and to enjoy life on Earth, he needs a lot of money. As in this moment, the male protagonist decides to become a hunter. Truth to tell, until just now he still cannot see the future clearly, because the native stuff is just way too basic. Can't even afford a bowl of soup. But it's different now, because he knew that hunters can make money. Since that's the case, from now on he will rely on magic hunting for a living, although he can't use magic now. The male protagonist was thinking about where to go to find monsters. As a result, he immediately heard the people around him discussing. There is an empty door open there, so he followed the gaze of the crowd. Sure enough, he saw in the air a space vortex exuding special magic fluctuations. It turns out that there are monsters in here. It seems that it needs to be analyzed, but there are too many people here to be convenient. He can't go in without a hunter's license. I don't know if there are any others nearby. Suddenly, the male protagonist was taken aback. He detected a familiar scent. If nothing unexpected happens, there should be another void gate nearby. So the male protagonist followed the aura and climbed a big mountain. It went smoothly along the way, except that he was in poor health. He was almost tired to the point of fainting, looking at the yellow tape in front of him. The male protagonist did not know what it was. He only felt that the aesthetics of Earthlings needed to be improved. Then he swaggered and walked towards the void gate. Not long after the male protagonist disappeared, another group of people came here. Because this void gate has been mutating frequently recently, they came here to investigate the reason. As the few people went deeper, they didn't see a single monster. This not only didn't raise their alertness. The reminder from Enrunsheng, the A-level hunter in the team, was not taken seriously. And soon, they paid the price for their ignorance. On the other side, the protagonist had already entered a very deep position in combat, but likewise, he did not encounter a single monster. This puzzled the protagonist a little. Could it be that his understanding of combat was wrong? Just that, he suddenly felt a surge of magic power. And this small but vibrant amount of magic power came from humans. In other words, someone had entered here. The protagonist followed the fluctuation and came to the back of a huge rock. Then he saw the scene before him. The team that was just a group of 4. In a blink of an eye, only 3 people remained. This scene completely frightened the other 2 guys. Seeing this, Enrunsheng shouted to the 2 men, "If you don't want to die, cheer up." However, before he finished speaking, he felt a chill coming from behind him. At the critical moment, Enrunsheng used his shield to hold up a protective shield in time. He blocked the fatal blow. Then he slammed the ground with a hammer, and then took advantage of the force to jump high into the air. With the speed of lightning, he kicked the stone man hard. When everything calmed down, the stone man had turned into rubble. The other 2 were shocked by this scene. As expected of an A-level hunter, although it is a defensive type of, Enrunsheng ignored the flattery of the 2. Let them pack up the corpses and leave as soon as possible. Soon he felt a chill coming from behind him once again. This time he didn't have time to do anything, and was caught directly in his hand, then thrown away like a bug. The other man in the team was shocked to see this scene. The next moment, the attack of the stone monster came to him. The man immediately swung his sword at the other side. However, just one touch, his sword was broken in 2. What followed was, he was punched and flied out. This scene directly scared the last woman. Facing the stone man's upcoming fists, I even forgot to run. Fortunately, Enrunsheng, who had recovered at the critical moment, blocked this blow for him. And now is the best time to use binding magic. If he can't be trapped here, they will be wiped out here. However, at this critical moment, this woman actually abandoned her teammates. One ran away. Do you dare to believe that after the aliens arrived on Earth, I participated in the dungeon for the first time? I fully understand what humanity is. Not long ago, The male protagonist entered an empty door alone, then hiding aside and watching an adventure team being refreshed by monsters. I saw that one of the women was about to die on the spot. It was fortunate that his teammates appeared just in time. They blocked the deadly attack. Normally, this would be the best time to use binding magic. If they didn't restrain the monster here, they would all be wiped out. But who could have thought, at this critical moment, he actually ran away? At that moment, the man's eyes were filled with disbelief. Then, not surprisingly, the man was punched to the ground by the monster at the last moment before his consciousness faded. And Rensheng only felt emptiness in his heart. Once he had awakened his A-level talent by chance, but he rejected invitations from many large guilds. Then he found some good people and formed a team. I had thought that everything would run smoothly. Who would have thought that such a tragic ending? The other person is about to go offline. The protagonist, who could no longer bear to watch, stood up. Thanks to the efforts of the other party just now, he finally completed his analysis. Don't be fooled by how big this guy looks. But in fact, he's just an old model golem. The so-called fiend is just a type of magic power doll. In the planet Alpha, where the male lead's home located, Buddha in various states. Small to sweep the floor, run errands, move bricks. Puppet. Fully stocked. Their planet. It can be said to be a workforce of golems. A nation under construction. Male lead's major is Weapon Golem. Although he talked confidently. In fact, it's actually not easy to deal with it. Don't underestimate this guy, although it looks bulky and attacks slowly. However, the male lead's body is too weak. He felt weak after a few times, but male lead suddenly had a chance. Because there's a large gemstone on the golem's arm, it's actually a magic identification sensor. As long as he can input stop command into the sensor, he can stop it. Although for general golems, only the owner or maker knows the emergency stop command. But this model is too old. The male lead knew it without even looking. Thus, alongside the male lead writing down the stop command, the giant MAGIC Chinese letter instantly fell to the ground. Of course, this alone was not enough to make it completely shut down. You must remove the core on its back. So the male lead started. Of course, there is no pressure for such a small thing. Looking at the thing in hand, the male lead can't help but sigh. It's very simple. When Rensheng reopened his eyes, what I saw was the moment when the protagonist pretended to be aggressive. What's the matter? Is he the only one who defeated the monster? At this moment, in Rensheng's eyes, the male lead is already a master. See the other party wake up. The male lead jumped down from the monster, then walked toward the other side. Seeing this, Rensheng was frightened with a cold sweat. Because under this circumstance, it is easily silenced, but no matter how he struggles, his body can't move. But the male lead came to him soon, condescending, looking at him, and Rensheng thought he was finished. Who would have thought that the other party would stretch out a hand towards him, then said, "Need help?" Rensheng, who successfully survived from the V-level dungeon, received extensive media attention, but he was not very happy. Because he knows these are all the contributions of that person, but the Hunter Association wanted to attribute this credit to him. Although they also knew that someone else had killed the monster. Who could blame Rensheng for not knowing the other party's name? If the other party was really a hunter stronger than Rensheng, there was no reason why he wouldn't know him, unless that person hadn't registered at all. So no matter how Rensheng objected, the association members tried to persuade him to accept, or it would affect his image. But no matter how the other party tried to persuade Rensheng wanted to tell the truth. Because this was the most basic respect for that hunter. In the end, the association members understood his determination and stopped trying to persuade him. So they let him leave. Although the man in glasses wants to make Rensheng take all the credit. But he also hopes that he can meet this powerful one and dignified hunter, and the hero that they were missing at this time. was opening the gate to a new world. He was deeply fascinated by playing with a cell phone for the first time. Earthlings, you are like gods. He has not stopped ever since, after he unlocked the cell phone last night. Everything on it attracted his attention. This is the paradise that he had hoped for. Thanks to the cell phone, the hero easily obtained the information that he wanted. He found out that it requires following a strict ranking in order system to enter the first gate of the void. And these awakened individuals who want to enter the first gate of the void all have to register with the Hunter Association as a hunter. He also found out that the person from before was only a level 1. But everything else will have to wait. Because the most important thing for him right now is to get a hunter's license. Others were experiencing lives of luxury and indulgence after transmigration. But for the hero, he almost starved to death in order to survive. The hero has no choice but to register to become a hunter. The first thing after registering is to accept safety theoretical education along with first gate of the void. The hero was listening in boredom on the side. To summarize, it's simply, do not act high and mighty in front of monsters. After the safety education was completed, the staff sent equipment to everyone. The male protagonist looked at the thing in his hand with puzzlement, not understanding what it was. It was unexpected that in this era, someone did not recognize this thing. Others laughed at him, asking if he came from outer space. The male protagonist on the side felt cold sweat all over his head. What happened? My identity as an alien was exposed. The staff told the male protagonist, this is a popular analyzer. Then I told him how to use it. When everyone got the equipment, Educator, the young lady asked everyone to point the camera at the butterfly in the air. The male protagonist followed the instructions and the monster's grade name immediately appeared on it. It turns out Earthlings used this to identify the identity of the enemy. In addition, the staff also told the male protagonist, this analyzer can not only analyze monsters, it can also detect equipment. After hearing this, the male protagonist immediately took a picture of the staff. Nothing was displayed as a result. It seems that this person is not good enough. Then the male protagonist started to use it on the plant on the side. The result really showed the information. But when he used it on the land, nothing was displayed. The male protagonist did not understand why this happened. Could it be that this thing can only identify things with magic? The presence or absence of magic to distinguish whether an item is useful. Convenience aside, but the accuracy is not high. After all, some things are without magic. It's also very useful. For example, these ordinary soils are typical examples. Because the soil can be used to make rare items that absorb magic. But it seems, no one here seems to know this. Obviously, as long as the world of magic is slightly developed, it is impossible not to know the magic absorption agent. Suddenly, the male protagonist's brain flashed with inspiration. The next moment, he stopped the staff. I want to ask you something. The staff asked him to ask. And the protagonist did not hesitate. Asked the doubts in his heart. When did the first magic awaken appear? Wenian staff, without any hesitation, give the correct answer. It was 7 years ago. 7 years ago, one day. Awakenings of every kind are emerging around the world. The male protagonist listened to this answer with incredulity. What? Only 7 years? You must know that the magical history in the Alpha House is over 60,000 years. So all along, I've been living with a group of primitives. Thinking about this, the male protagonist couldn't help but shed tears. He said, how is that possible? Only electronic engineering has developed rapidly. But then again, even if he used the magic absorption apparatus, no one would know, right? Hunters have always been a high-income group that lives a life of luxury in the media. But unlike what ordinary people imagine, the life of a low-level hunter is pure hell. What's more, this body that the male protagonist possesses has a problem with one of its legs. Now, it can't use magic again. So you have to get a job before you starve. To deal with monsters, the protagonist got a lot of magic potions. And on this earth, there are indeed monsters that can be killed with this. The problem is that the monster lives in a C-class otherworldly gate. A mere S-class protagonist He is not qualified to enter at all. Just arrived on Earth. He was still very unfamiliar with everything. He can't do the business of magic potion. This is a bit uncomfortable. Just then, the phone suddenly trembled violently. The protagonist was taken aback. The protagonist picked up the phone and looked at it. It turned out to be a disaster warning. A B-level monster appeared. Tell everyone to evacuate and hide as soon as possible. How is that possible? At this time, of course, you have to go out and watch the excitement. The protagonist got dressed and came to the street. He saw that the surrounding crowd was terrified and fled in panic. On the TV tower not far ahead of him, a huge B-level monster was roaring to the sky. Of course, there are some who are not afraid of death and are watching. A cordon had already been set up around. Just then, the protagonist was suddenly hit. The person who bumped into him not only did not apologize, instead, he complained that the protagonist was blocking his way. The protagonists looked at each other with a gloomy face. The other party thought he wanted to fight. However, the protagonist does not understand what this means at all. I'm just looking at you. Looking at the male lead, he seems to be very fierce. The blonde's attitude improved a lot. He stated that he was a hunter and reminded the male lead to stay away. The male lead, unwilling to show weakness, said that he was a hunter too. The blonde asked the male lead what level he was. Then he heard the male lead mouth the words F level. Hearing this, the blonde almost laughed to death. Ha ha ha, what kind of rubbish is this? The male lead looked at the other party uncomprehendingly. What is this guy laughing at? The man was clearly just an F-level hunter. Who would have thought that he would actually have an A-level fan? Just now, a monster suddenly appeared in the city center. The bored male lead resolutely went forward to join in the fun. In order to prevent the monster from harming ordinary people, the army dispatched helicopters to try to stop it. However, their attacks on the monster could only be considered tickling, and the monster just casually flicked its tail, and the helicopter turned into a huge ball of fire. It was a blessing that it landed on the ground. At this time, the support hunters finally arrived. Seeing that two ordinary people were about to fall into the monster's mouth, a hunter jumped straight down from the helicopter and slashed its huge tongue with a single knife. In an instant, the monster let out a painful roar. Then he turned and fled without hesitation. At this time, another hunter aimed at the target and pulled back an arrow. The next moment, two arrows accurately shot the monster's tail. Seeing that things were not going well, as a giant lizard monster decisively severed the tail to survive, can now think to run is obviously too late. Only saw the male protagonist's old acquaintances and jumped down from the aircraft directly. Then carrying 10,000 gen momentum, suddenly kicking hard on the monster's back. The monster fell from the midair to the ground, while Rencheng does not give the opponent any opportunity to rest. Great force to sink a hit, hitting the monster's belly again. Just like that with only 2 moves. Just now the arrogant and domineering monster helplessly fell to the ground. To see the performance of some professional hunters, the Chinese letter crowd were all excitedly and interested. People who resolved the monster walked towards the direction of the male protagonist. Male protagonist recently understood one thing, that is, extreme hunter is already the mainstay of this world. That is why everyone likes them. Just like now, each one excitedly wished to act as a dog. However, just such a person, at the first time of seeing the protagonist, held his hand with both hands, then looked at the protagonist in admiration like a little brother. Greeted the protagonist. Just think about the other's appearance in the comment to resolve the magic statue's situation, and Rencheng felt that it was handsome as hell. Previously had looked down on the male protagonist's blonde, now looked at the protagonist with a face of cold sweat. What the fuck is happening? Can it be a boss? This kid constantly sneaking glances at Rencheng's expression, glaring at the other person with a gloomy look. Asked the male protagonist if he is his friend. Seeing this, the blonde almost peed his pants. He stammered for half a day and couldn't say a word. However, in the blink of an eye, Rencheng ignored him. Instead, he happily introduced himself to the male protagonist and handed him his business card. Of course, he also asked the male protagonist's name by the way, and Rensheng then invited the male protagonist into the woods. Of course, don't get me wrong, he just wanted to repay the male protagonist's life-saving grace. As it happened, the male protagonist needed someone's help with something. So he took out his phone. He pointed to a location on the map. Can you enter a space gate with me? Soon the two entered a gate to nowhere that seems desolate. Up to now, Rensheng still couldn't quite believe it. A hunter as strong as the male lead is actually only in F rank. Just now, the male lead already has his true nature. Communicate with the other party. But how is this possible? And Rensheng wondered if the measuring device was broken. But soon he made up the truth in his mind. Because the awakened people above the middle level need to participate in the dungeon semi-forcibly, so some people who don't want to be manipulated by the association will fabricate false wake-up values. And the protagonist in his eyes, there is no doubt that this kind of person. The two marched forward in the copy. Soon the protagonist found the target of this trip. It was a monster similar to a bat. And Rensheng was curious about how the protagonist would do it. The result is that I only saw the protagonist take out a handful of scattered earth into the sky. The next moment, the bats fell into fireballs. The effect of the potion is immediate. But see this scene. However, Yanxing had a doubt. That is a problem that can obviously be solved with bare hands. Why does he have to use props? The male lead is very confused. This kid did he watched a romantic drama with his toes. Rensheng doubted that the male protagonist had been standing on top for too long, forgot the ecological environment of lower-level hunters. Seeing the other person look like this, the male protagonist knows that there is no point in explaining anymore. There is no need to expose your weaknesses. So the male lead came up with a sudden idea. Start talking nonsense. After the awakening appears, some people can lift a 1-ton truck. Some can manipulate elements out of thin air. These are all very convenient abilities. But since these powers all appear out of thin air, then it's also possible to disappear out of thin air. I'm a bit scared. Therefore, I do not intend to rely on awakening ability. Initially, I was worried that he would not believe me. Outcome, he only saw and Rensheng appears to have been moved to tears. You are right. Why didn't I think of that? Objects easily within reach is also easier to lose. A man who is a level S hunter, but he fell for a level F male lead. Even went to the extent of causing a car accident just to have the male lead's contact information. Not long ago, the male lead just exited the dungeon with Rensheng. Then they ate some junk food as a reward, and Rensheng asked the male lead to continue to bring him along in the future because his team had just disbanded. He had too little experience alone, and he didn't want to form a team again. As for his feelings, the male lead understood. After all, he had just encountered his teammate who would give you a bit of a psychological shadow, and if he wants to enter a level 1 dungeon, it's just right to form a team with an advanced hunter. So the hero agrees to this request. Of course, the hero emphasized to Rensheng beforehand, you must protect yourself well. I don't have the ability to save you. The hero has always been honest. But Rensheng didn't believe it. He thought the boss was worried about getting hurt. The next day, when the hero was eating, he received a call from Rensheng. A new copy is open. Ask if the hero wants to go and have a look. The hero was of course excited to agree. Every time a new door appears, the Hunter Association will send someone to investigate and temporarily restrict entry until the investigation is completed. And in this place, in the doorway, it is said that a special plant was discovered. Consider that kind of unknown plant. Perhaps it is the key to restoring his own magic. The protagonist decides to go in and see. Leave immediately if it is not. Just then, a luxury sports car suddenly galloped. Then a man with blue hair came down. Look at this guy wearing black sunglasses. The big gold chain looks arrogant. The protagonist asks the Rensheng next to him who the other party is, and the answer given by Rensheng, somewhat beyond the protagonist's expectations. The other party, unexpectedly, one of the only 3 S-rank hunters in the country. Jiang Chanhao, the protagonist, can see that his magic is very stable. It is indeed a rare talent. But when the protagonist observed the other party, Jiang Chanhao suddenly felt something. The next moment, the eyes of the two touch. The other party's reaction surprised the protagonist. His eyes seemed to be special. And Runsheng whispered to the protagonist, "That is the dragon's eye, a rare prop." But when the two were whispering, Jiang Chanhao walked toward the two. Then Ignore and Runsheng, the A-rank hunter, looking straight at the protagonist, asked the protagonist what his name is. He then asked the protagonist what his hunter level was after getting the answer. And Runsheng took the words with a smirk. Indicates that the protagonist is just his porter. However, Jiang Chanhao just looked at and Runsheng with disdain. "I'm not talking to you. The boss can't afford it." And Runsheng was so scared that he hid behind the protagonist. The male lead answered calmly as F rank. After hearing this, Jiang Chanhao sneered. "Is that true?" Really? The other party's performance made the male lead somewhat suspicious. Could he see through this body's hidden magic power, even though due to respiratory damage? The magic power wasn't able to be used normally. The total amount of magic power in the body wouldn't decrease. Furthermore, Jiang Chanhao could use the dragon's eye to see a person's potential. However, no matter what, the male lead definitely wouldn't admit it. After all, he had an official hunter's license. However, Jiang Chanhao didn't believe an F-rank could look directly at him in the eye. He originally wanted to invite the male lead to join them, but was interrupted by An Rusheng's voice. An Rusheng said that we have something to do. Then he didn't care about the male lead's struggles and pushed him away forcefully. After the two people had completely left Jiang Chanhao's sight, only then did An Rusheng explain his actions to the male lead. Because that man has a criminal record, no one would be willing to enter the A-class dungeon with an S-rank wanted criminal. Furthermore, An Rusheng had a relative rank 3rd in AG. He had recently entered a dungeon with Jiang Chanhao and was attacked. Therefore, An Rusheng was afraid that the other party would attack the male lead and took him away. After understanding this, the male lead was touched. He really was a cute mammal. Since the other party was so dangerous, then today's meeting would be over. We could just cut down that plant later. However, there was one more thing. Since the other person's dragon eye is fake, are there any dragon costs? If I change it for myself, wouldn't it solve the problem of not being able to use magic? And Runsheng helped check. The price is reasonable. 2.6 billion. What did you say? 2.6 billion. In a word, directly extinguish the heat that the protagonist had just raised. It's better not to listen. The poor, mean protagonist shed bitter tears. Soon the two said goodbye. The protagonist took a taxi back alone. In the car, he checked Zhang Hui's information. I feel more and more terrible about him. I should not have looked at him at that time. What can I do if he wants to harm me? But as the saying goes, what you fear will come true. A supercar suddenly appeared from behind the taxi. Then the accelerator was stepped on and hit the taxi with a loud braking sound. The taxi circled in place several times, finally hit the pole on the side of the road and stopped. The protagonist rolled directly under the seat. The driver, who recovered, first nervously looked back at the protagonist. Seeing that the protagonist was not injured, he got out of the car and was ready to start scolding. Can you fucking drive? As a result, Zhang Hui was seen getting out of the car. I'm really sorry about that. I haven't driven for a long time. I got the brake and accelerator mixed up. After speaking, he took out his phone and wanted the contact information of the protagonist, said to discuss the solution of the accident. As for the driver, just threw a stack of money at him and told him to get lost. The male Li watched this godly operation with no expression. The driver, who got the money, ran off in a flash. The remaining Zhang Changham once again asked the male lead to hand over his phone number, said that he had no more cash, would transfer the medical expenses to him later. In car accidents, all be handled like this. The male lead felt like he had opened his eyes for the first time. He still gave him his phone number. Just like this, the S-rank hunter spent a lot of effort to finally add the F-rank hunter's contact information. Zhang Changhan was originally a second-generation rich guy, but he had a history of special assault. although he found a very awesome lawyer. This matter was settled. But the internet was full of his negative news. And the biggest scandal for him was that several years ago, his parents had died because of the dungeon break. Immediately after the accident, he sold his parents' company. Because of this, many people suspected that he committed a heinous act for money. Of course, that was just a rumor. There was just no evidence. At this time, Jiang Changhan looked at the male lead with great interest. I have a job that makes money. Do you want to hear about it? The man was obviously just a low-level S-rank hunter. But the aloof S-rank hunter actually wanted to team up with him and was even willing to give up 80% of the income from the dungeon for the sake of it. Such conditions that were like a pie falling from the sky made the male lead very surprised. Could it be that the other party is interested in the potential of his own body? Does that mean when I can use magic, can easily bring this planet into his hands? Thinking of the male protagonist's arrogant opening, I cannot enter the SGE void now. I don't know if I can work with you. However, Jiang Changhui's next words pulled him back to the cold reality. What are you thinking? You this level of hunters. It is impossible to enter the advanced air gate. It turned out that Jiang Changhui wanted to become the man behind the male protagonist, cultivate the male protagonist personally. The male protagonist who understands that he has misunderstood, embarrassed to want to disappear on the spot. It turned out that was the case, but he still has a question. What did you see about me? Make such a suggestion. Hearing that, Jiang Changhui's mouth slowly drew an arc. Well, you will know later. Feeling that something was wrong, the male protagonist excused me and ran out, and then told Enrasheng, think about it now. That guy clearly hit the car deliberately. After listening to the experience of the male protagonist, Enrasheng is even more certain. The other party likes to trouble senior hunters. The male protagonist also agreed with this. What should I do if I want to find the police? But for what reason? Did you say that the S-class hunter wanted to protect himself and give yourself equipment? The helpless protagonist could only choose to give up. Just then, Enrasheng suddenly raised the recent news. It said that humanity would soon be able to conquer the disaster of Yikanmen. This was a good topic. The protagonist was very interested in the existence of Yikanmen. The world had undergone a change 7 years prior. Yikanmen and monsters began appearing in the lives of people. At the same time, mutants appeared among humans. Others may not know why. But the protagonist understood the source of magic is drawing on power released via the Milky Way. But the Earth's stone layers are too thick, and the power can't reach down. But Yikanmen's sudden appearance allowed the power to rise to the surface. It then led to the emergence of awakened inhumans. However, there was one thing that protagonist could not figure out. That was to create a... What was its purpose? The monsters inside definitely wanted to kill humans. As for the equipment that was dropped, it was only bait placed in traps. But if the mice dodged the traps, and the bait was no longer effective, whoever was behind it would become angry, right? When Runsheng heard protagonist, he felt that made a lot of sense. But protagonist was suddenly shocked, because he felt a surge of power bubbling up like lava. And the location of the power surge was right beneath Rensheng's feet, to which Rensheng was completely unaware. He was curious why protagonist had suddenly stopped, but protagonist had no time to say anything. He shoved Rensheng out of the way. Then, amid Rensheng's incredulous gaze, a wave of boundless energy suddenly surged up, engulfing protagonist in it. Sensing the teleportation power from his body, protagonist realized something and regretted it. He should have grabbed him earlier. By the time protagonist came to, he was already in a pure white passage. Protagonist could not help but look around. Could this be inside of? If he was to encounter a monster in such an narrow space, it would be terrible. The protagonist can only take action first. However, with this body that can't even release magic, he really doesn't know how to pass the level. In this way, he walked all the way, and soon came to a open area. The way ahead was blocked by a huge stone gate. There's a stone tablet in front of the door. There seems to be something written on it. The protagonist was about to observe carefully, but suddenly he noticed that someone was coming from both sides. One of them, it happened to be Zhang Changhao, who had ulterior motives for him, and the other one he didn't know. Soon they all came to the stone tablet. For a while, it stood in a situation of three-legged confrontation. Zhang Changhao came up and said to another person in a sarcastic tone, "Zhang Xiaoxing heard that you are in Singapore." And someone else said, "I'm going back to China today." It's obvious that the relationship between these two people is not very good. So the protagonist asked Zhang Changhang, "Do you two know each other?" The words shocked both of them. Zhang Changhang sneered on the spot. "It turns out that there are people who don't know you. It seems that you have to work hard to move around." To this, the protagonist just wanted to say that I didn't know you before. Then I listened to Zhang Changhang's explanation. His name is Zhang Xiaoxing, the #1 hunter in country H. The male lead didn't expect that. The other party is still such a powerful guy. Next, Zhang Changhang introduced the male protagonist, an ordinary F-rank hunter. The two greeted each other easily. Then focus on. Click a button on the bracelet. This is an analyzer. The protagonist didn't expect that there would be such a simple design. Soon the results will be analyzed. This is an unconfirmed airspace. No relevant information. When I saw the rating EX, it was actually level X. Now I feel that the trouble is coming. The protagonist doesn't understand what EX represents. He took out his mobile phone to check. As a result, the phone displayed darkness. The protagonist, who had encountered this situation for the first time, was stunned. It turned out that this was a disturbing sign from a certain airspace. If you don't go out as soon as possible, the phone will be ruined. So they started to study the slate. It says faith is the symbol. Ikamaki. Although I don't know if this sentence is. What does it mean? But it seems like in front of us, we can only choose to push open this huge stone door. Keep moving forward. That is a small team that has two of the strongest S-level hunters. But they gave it their all. But they could not shake this small stone door. The male protagonist was shocked by this. Among the Awakeness, S-level is a special existence. All of them are monsters with terrifying abilities. But now they are helpless against a stone door. Since strength doesn't work, the only thing that can be tried right now seems to be only the strange lion statue. Regarding this, Zhang Changhao stepped forward and took one look and came to a conclusion. Judging from the size of this hole, it seems that an arm can just fit in. A sentence made the other two silent. The male protagonist had guessed something, but before he could decide whether to be the first to go up, just witness the heart go first. Then he thrust his arm into the lion's mouth without hesitation. At the same time, a loud bang sounded. The male lead and Zhang Changhao looked in the direction of the sound. As a result, I saw the door that had not moved at all. Opened it myself. The male protagonist saw that Zhang Xiaoxing's face didn't look good. Asked him what's wrong. Then I saw the other party raise the hand just now. He just got his blood sucked. He was so frightened that he wanted to pull his arm away. But I can't do it. He even thought about cutting it off. Zhang Changhao doesn't care about these. It's not your own blood anyway. Now that the door is open, let's go then. The male protagonist felt something was wrong at this time. Is it really that simple? In this way, the three of them continued along the passage. Then an identical door. And the same lion appeared. Seeing this, Zhang Changhao's face suddenly darkened. Damn, this time it's the same. However, Zhang Xiaoxing directly pushed the other person away. Not now. Time hesitated. Must leave here as soon as possible. The next moment, he reached his hand in again. The result is the same as before. The door opens automatically. Then the three of them met the next master. This time, I hope Zhang Changhao can complete it. Because the lion's blood-sucking capacity has changed. I didn't feel anything the first time. The second time I felt dizzy. If nothing unexpected happens, the more blood you suck, the more. So Zhang Xiaoxing hopes that the two of them will take turns. But it's obvious, Zhang Changhao does not have this kind of dedication. Seeing that the other party is unwilling to cooperate, Zhang Zixing's expression changed instantly. Zhang Changhao looked like he was like, "What can you do to me?" The arrogant expression. Seeing the atmosphere between the two people becoming more and more tense, the male protagonist was about to interrupt, rather than waiting for the fatal blood to be sucked away. It's better to take the initiative now. But before he could speak, Zhang Changhao was the first to speak. "Isn't there another person? You look for him." Hearing this, the male protagonist immediately realized that although there are no monsters here, but it's not a safe place. Contact us as long as you donate blood. You can continue to move forward in the maze. No matter how you look at it, you need to offer a person as a sacrifice to leave here. Thinking of this, the male protagonist burst into tears. "I'm done." However, Zhang Zixing's moral level obviously much taller than Zhang Changhao. When there are two S-level players in the team, do you still want to push the responsibility to the S class? Before the words were spoken, a few people noticed something. "Look, behind you." Then a monster appeared out of nowhere. Seeing this, the male protagonist was shocked that there is nothing here. The next second the monsters started to attack. And his first target was actually the male protagonist. Based on the male protagonist's current body, obviously unstoppable, he closed his eyes in fear. At the critical moment, bending down, draw the sword and thrust. The monster was killed on the spot. This handsome performance stunned the male lead. As for the other guy, no need to mention it. Just then, another monster appeared and attacked Zhang Changhao from behind. Seeing that the other party did not react, the male protagonist quickly reminded loudly. However, Zhang Changhao's emerald eyes, just a quick glance back. The next moment, he punched the monster hard to the ground. Look at this terrible force. Male protagonist guessed his awakening skill is about physical strengthening. Zhang Changhao punched, roughly estimated the monster level, probably the level of sea-level monsters. At this time, Zhang Zixing reminded everyone not to take it lightly. Hearing this, the two followed his gaze and looked. As a result, I saw that the walls on both sides, several monsters appeared. Soon, monsters emerged from it. In the blink of an eye, the three of them were surrounded by monsters. Although they are not high-level monsters, but the number of them is also very annoying. Two hunters who don't like each other. Leave your back to each other. Then Zhang Changhao clenched his fist, which glowed green. A punch blasted out a green wave of air. Destroy everything along the way. Zhang Zixing clenched his weapon tightly. Then he swung his sword. A raging firestorm swept across the land. The male protagonist looked at him in surprise. The performance of two S-level hunters. All the monsters were led away by them. So much so that the male protagonist didn't have any. Soon Jiangxi, a gold shop, felt a little tired because of the blood sucked, causing him to become physically weak. And there are so many monsters. This won't work. Just then, he suddenly saw the red eyes of the stone lion. Then a light bulb went off in his head. So that's how it is. The man is obviously the top-ranked S-class hunter. But in one copy, a bottle knocked someone unconscious just because his teammates guess. A sacrifice is required to clear this instance. Just now, Zhang Changhao and Zhang Zixing dealt with a wave of monsters. Although the monsters are not too strong, but there are too many. Their performance impressed the male protagonist greatly. It seems that the plan to conquer the earth is a long way to go. Just then, Zhang Zixing asked the other two to look at the stone statue. The lion at this time, the eyes are glowing scarlet. Then he spoke out his guess. This empty door. If you don't donate blood within the specified time, a group of monsters will appear. But before he finished speaking, a monster suddenly appeared behind him. I was just about to kill this guy who attacked me from behind with a sword. Zhang Changhao spoke with great interest. Is there a time limit? As soon as the words fell, a large wave of monsters rushed out one after another. Seeing this, even Zhang Zixing felt a great deal of pressure. He no longer counts on Zhang Changhao. That guy yelled the hero's name. I hope the male lead can donate blood first. Who would have thought that before the male lead reply? Jiang Changhao suddenly turned back. Without any hesitation, he rushed toward the stone statue. Even in the face of countless monsters blocking, there was no stop. Finally, he succeeded and I reached him. The next moment, countless monsters disappeared like ink. The male protagonist and Zhang Zixin were all surprised to see this scene. At the same time, the door to the next level slowly opened again. At this time, Jiang Changhao turned around and asked who would be next. Zhang Ziqing said that they would take turns. Because F7 may not be able to hold up, a national hero indeed. The high-quality male protagonist is admired thanks to himself. Even the clothes are not dirty yet. This made the male protagonist feel a little embarrassed. In this way, the three of them passed through the stone gate several times. At this time, due to excessive blood loss, even as the strong hunter couldn't bear it anymore. Seeing this, the male protagonist hurried forward to support the other party. Ask him if he's okay. Zhang Ziqing said palely that it was okay. This type of sudden control door is generally small in scale. They should be getting close to the exit. The male protagonist looked at Jiang Changhao, who was still full of energy, and sighed. Fortunately, it was his turn to open the door this time. However, Jiang Changhao suggested stopping first. After all, no one can guarantee how many doors there are behind. Both of them are reaching their physical limits. Jiang Changhao thinks they may have missed some clues. Need to go back and look for it. Zhang Ziqing only felt that the other party was stalling for time. Maybe they even want to take advantage of the monster tide to attack me. Just like the attack on Choi Jin before. Facing suspicion, Jiang Changhao fell into silence. Then he said nothing more. Turn around and walk toward the statue. But regarding Choi Jin's matter, he said it was just a misunderstanding. Of course, he also understands why he is not trusted. After all, I have a criminal record. At this time, Jiang Changhao turned around and looked at Zhang Ziqing behind him. You are too wary of me. Even if it's your turn to donate blood this time, I will also suggest going back to check the room. Jiang Changhao had already put his hand in. This time, he obviously couldn't hold on any longer. Seeing this, he stepped forward, worriedly asked him if he was okay. Jiang Changhao said it was no problem. He brought recovery medicine. I can hold on for 2 more times. He started taking things out of his bag. Zhang Ziqing said, if you reach the next room and can't see the exit, just think of other ways. The male protagonist watched Jiang Changhao take out a bottle of recovery medicine. I was thinking this guy is pretty normal. Should I support him next time? As a result, I only saw the other party holding the bottle. He swung it down towards the defenseless Zhang Ziqing. With a bang. After the bottle and Zhang Ziqing, the back of the head has a close contact. That's all. The most powerful S-Glass Hunter was knocked down by a bottle. Zhang Ziqing lost consciousness on the spot. The male protagonist beside him was stunned. Jiang Changhao is very satisfied with the result. I didn't expect this trick to be so useful. The male protagonist asked Jiang Changhao with a cold sweat on his face. Jiang Changhao explained. This alien gate, it is very similar to the Iron Lady Ecumen that appeared in Northern Europe. If nothing unexpected happens, Hunter entering the alien gate, only Jixian can leave. And from the recent EX copy survival rate statistics, it has nothing to do with Hunter level. The survival rate is only about 60%. So just in case. I can only feel sorry for Zhang. The male protagonist thinks carefully. He is right. If someone must sacrifice, of course it's best if it's not me. Besides, aren't there 2 S-Glass ones? Responsibility. How come it's not my turn as an S rank? Having said that, but the male protagonist finally felt guilty. So when Jiang Changhao was preparing, when I put my arm in, the male protagonist suddenly interrupted him, patted his chest. This room I come to. Hearing this, Jiang Changhao glanced at the other party. Why do you feel guilty? Just be quiet when I give you a head start. I'll get you out of here alive. Judging from the amount of blood sucked by the lion, this trial is almost over. as the stone door slowly opened again. The male protagonist was surprised, because the scene before their eyes finally changed. I saw a person standing quietly not far away, and the hand of the stone statue lying quietly for this clearance reward. Both of them stared with eyes wide open in disbelief. It's over so easily. Jiang Changhao feels this is unscientific because the price is so small. I thought I needed a living sacrifice, so I knocked him out. Zhang Xiaxing, but this is not a good way to do it. If Zhang Xiaxing wakes up and investigates, but something big is going to happen. However, the male protagonist doesn't care about the other party's entanglement. Walk calmly to the statue and take the final reward. Just one look and you'll know. This thing in your hand is a precious magic tool. But the hero has no greed. He suggested giving this thing to Zhang Xiaxing as an apology. But Jiang Changhao thought it was useless. He attacked the number 1 hunter. Not only him, even the association will not let me go. The best way to deal with it now. Just take the opportunity to kill the other party. Anyway, the body will disappear with an empty door. But there was a witness. Jiang Changhao doesn't believe that the male protagonist will keep his secret for him. The male protagonist asked the other party what he was going to do. Kill yourself? This made Jiang Changhao a little sad. He can't bear to do that. It's just a small request. Jiang Changhao patted the male lead on the shoulder. Then she stared at the male protagonist with ill intentions. Can you say that you knocked Zhang Xiaxing unconscious? The man just cleared a copy. The results attracted much attention. Just because he admitted, I knocked out the top-ranked S-class hunter. Just now, Jiang Changhao suggested that the male lead take the blame for him. The reason why he did this, just to see if the male protagonist is real. Jiang Changhao's power is extraordinary, because he has a pair of dragon eyes. That was the one he got from the level 1 monster green dragon. Rare items obtained. Through it, you can not only improve your magic, you can also see far away, and you can directly through these eyes determine when a person wakes up. Since he got these eyes, I've never squinted to see anything. Till recently, he met the male protagonist. I saw something I had never seen before. The strange magic of the past. So, he went straight up and asked the other person's name and rank. When I learned that the opponent's level was only F level, Jiang Changhao's first impression was that it was a lie. Because of the F-class hunter, it's impossible to look yourself in the eyes of ordinary people and low-level awakeners. A high-level awakener like him, like a ferocious beast, exuding a deadly threat. To verify this, afterwards, Jiang Changhao also I went to a convenience store I hadn't been to in a long time. Sure enough, the clerk was trembling with fear. So the S-rank thing is just nonsense. So, in order to tease the male protagonist, Jiang Changhao first created a small accident. Then he asked the other party about the best benefits. From beginning to end, the male protagonist has a poker face. This attitude even made Jiang Changhao feel, is he looking down on me, an S-rank hunter? For Jiang Changhao, who has been subjected to all kinds of attention, the male protagonist's indifference made him feel satisfied. So he let the male lead take the blame. It's definitely not because I hate the male lead. In fact, he has the ability to solve Zhang Xiaxing's problem. He wanted to know what abilities the male protagonist had hidden. Want to see how will he react to his threats? But what he didn't expect was, the male protagonist actually agreed to this. This was beyond Jiang Changhao's expectations. He didn't know what to say for a moment. From the other person's face, Jiang Changhao did not see any fear. So why did he do that? Don't you want to conflict with yourself? Back to the point. The other party said that it is not possible to enter the S-level space gate now. I never said I couldn't before. Jiang Changhao has reason to suspect the male protagonist is a high-level awakener who deliberately suppresses his magic power. How is it necessary to suppress magic power to this extent? This must be very uncomfortable. Although I can't wait to stimulate each other. But let's stop here for today. Let's get out of this damn place first. What he didn't know was, At this time, the male protagonist is as steady as an old dog. In fact, a group of people were already panicking, finally survived. So the male protagonist is in front. Jiang Changhao supported Zhang Zia and was attentive behind him. The three of them walked towards the copy exit. When the hero returned to the outside again, soon I was shocked by the scene before my eyes. Because not far from him there were reporters, and see someone come out alive. The reporters waiting here became excited one by one. Various shutter sounds continued to ring. At the same time, reporters rushed to ask questions. What monsters are there in the universe? Well, are there any other survivors? It was at this time, the male protagonist discovered. No wonder there are so many people here. All the exits are here. Before the male protagonist could ask anything, the reporters stared in disbelief. Jiang Changhao was seen carrying Zhang Ziexin on his back. Came out from an empty door. I didn't expect there were two S level. But why did Zhang Ziexin faint? At the same time, the association staff immediately came forward to inquire about the situation. Although, I have many questions to ask. But the first question is, why did Yun Ha Xin faint? The staff also thought, Zhang Ziexin, it was attacked by a secret device in an empty door. Who would have thought that Jiang Changhao actually looked at the male lead? We are just choosing this sacrifice. There was a little friction. So he knocked out Yun Ha Sung. The male protagonist looked at the other person speechlessly. As soon as the copy was released, he started lying. As for this statement, the staff didn't believe it at all. After all, compared to someone who has never heard of it, Hunter, it is obvious that Jiang Changhao is more likely to have done it. Although this is indeed the case. But the feeling of being doubted still makes Jiang Changhao feel very unhappy. Next moment, he stared at the male protagonist with his green eyes. Don't stand there stupidly. Say something. The male protagonist who watched it was sweating profusely. He was silent for a while. Then he spoke expressionlessly. It was me who made Zhang Ziexin faint. Hear it. Whether it is the association staff or the on-site reporters. All of them widened their eyes in shock. Although the male protagonist explained that he had no intention of harming the other party. I just let him sleep so that I can pass the level smoothly. When he wakes up, he will apologize. But no matter what. This is unbelievable. Because hunters other than S level, it's simply impossible to do this. However, at this moment, Jiang Changhao suddenly showed an extremely weak appearance. He looked at the association staff breathlessly. My state! How to attack Zhang Ziexin? Upon hearing this, the association staff fell into silence. Although Jiang Changhao lost a lot of blood in the empty door. But the male protagonist remembers that he was not so serious. I guess this guy is pretending. It was at this time. The reporters present suddenly reacted. They rushed toward the male protagonist. He kept asking if it was really him who knocked MS unconscious. The male protagonist replied with a cold face, I did it. Looking at the report about the male protagonist in my hand, Zhang Ziexin woke up in a hospital and clenched his hands. How dare you do this to me? The man is obviously just a lowest level S-level hunter. But it attracted the attention of the strongest S-level hunters. Just now, An Rensheng invites the male lead to dinner. Although the previous news was deleted. But An Ruisheng has already seen it. He wants to know, is it true that the male protagonist knocked Zhang Ziexin unconscious? The male protagonist's reply made him, are you surprised by this? I guess so. The man's cell phone rang. Pick up the phone and listen to the delicious meal. I feel that the fragrance is gone instantly because the caller was the victim Zhang Ziexin who was knocked unconscious. The male protagonist responded, let An Ruisheng eat first. He went to the side to make a phone call, leaving An Rensheng alone. Zhang Ziexin's purpose for calling is simple. He wanted to know in an empty door, did the male lead really knock himself out? Although it happened suddenly, he can't remember the process, but I feel like this was done by Jiang Changhao, but he wasn't sure. Zhang Ziexin said that he only remembered being hit on the back of the head. But the problem is his last glimpse. What I saw was the male protagonist's cold eyes. So he now asks the male protagonist to explain this matter. The male protagonist listened with a cold sweat on his forehead. This is not good. Should I just confess? It was Chang Hao who threatened him to take the blame. But how can he trust Zhang Xiaoxing? Need to know the reason why Zhang Xiaoxing is called a national hero. Not because he is a messenger of justice. Symbol, because he leads the way in terms of the number of MTNet goals he scored. In the final analysis, he is just a model worker who is only interested in dungeons. Would such a person protect a mere F level? So the man admitted this. I'm sorry, Zhang Xiaoxin, I knock you out. Then the male protagonist explained, I just don't want to see him trying too hard. I was planning to make a sacrifice myself as an apology. The dungeon reward after clearing the level is given to him. A simple sentence. Zhang Zia's heart was throbbing. Are you fucking kidding me? This problem could have been solved through dialogue. Now, I want to use a prop to solve the problem. He can't accept anyone being knocked unconscious in a strange space that requires sacrifices. I can't believe it's for his own good. Moreover, John Chang Hao and the male lead, knowing each other from the beginning, Zhang Xiaoxin suspected that the two were in the same group. Of course, the most important thing is, are you really an S-rank hunter? Hearing this, the male protagonist fell into silence. He wanted to say that he had a secret. However, Zhang Xiaoxin no longer wanted to listen to his nonsense. It's just a waste of time to continue. Finally, I was looking out the window. I will keep watching you from now on. After saying that, she didn't even wait for the male lead to continue explaining. Hang up the phone directly. Then I was determined. Apologized to the assistant who has been waiting for a long time. The assistant laughed dryly and said it was okay. Afterwards, he handed over all the information the other party wanted. Although the union immediately took action, those news have been removed. But I've seen everything I should see. A large number of people have appeared online to disparage Zhang Xiaoxing. The assistant lady told him not to read these replies. But Zhang Xiaoxing is not that fragile. Now the question is, the whole world already knows, S-level hunters are not invincible. Many people will be upset because of this. The person who caused all this? The assistant guessed it was Zhang Changhao. He also investigated the identity of the male protagonist. It's really just an S-class. At first, Zhang Xiaoxin also thought so. But if that's the case, Zhang Changhao has no reason to let him lie. There's no need to scare him. Take the blame for yourself. Wouldn't it be easier to just kill him? Besides, more importantly, the eyes he saw when he fell. No human emotions at all. Since awakening, Zhang Xiaoxing had never seen anyone who looked so out of place. He had reason to suspect that the other party's level was fabricated. Have your assistant contact the association. Apply for the awakening value of that man. What else? The superpowers used by awakened people are collectively called skills. The moment every awakener awakens, at least you will learn one. Skills, but the magic on this planet has various restrictions. For example, the fire attribute is positive. Even if I risk my life, you can't learn other types of magic. They want to use other magic methods. Only one. That is to spend a huge amount of money to buy skill stones. But the male lead is different. He was reincarnated after learning various magics. Theoretically, as long as the conditions are met, you can use all the magic on Earth. But this body has lung problems. Causes magic to be unable to merge. His talents cannot be used. To solve this problem, he found a way to make a magic amplification potion. But there is no way to produce the materials needed for the amplifier. But it's not that easy to get in. He controls the guild with the most hunters currently. In the hands of the magic tower. At this time, the male protagonist is standing outside the magic tower. As soon as he showed up, he was driven away by the staff. Because the male lead had been here yesterday, people without reservations are not allowed in. However, at this time, his younger brother An Rencheng suddenly appeared. It turned out that he asked An Rencheng to help make an appointment. As a famous first-class hunter, the application of An Rencheng is much easier. And seeing An Rencheng appear, the staff member who just looked impatient, his expression changed instantly. Because he happens to be a fan of An Rencheng, the two began to communicate enthusiastically. An Rencheng said, already made an appointment with the Magic Tower representative through the union. The male protagonist successfully entered the Magic Tower. The staff also apologized for what happened just now. Then the two of them came to the front desk and explained that they had made an appointment. The front desk has already been notified, and tell them that the representative is at the top. Then let them take the elevator up by themselves. When the elevator reaches the 60th floor, the scene before them startled the two. The male protagonist looked at the scene in front of him with a cold sweat on his face. Something seems to be wrong here. At the same time, the top floor of the Magic Tower, there is a red-haired lady here. What woman is waiting for? He is one of the 3 strongest S-level hunters. But he fell in love with a lowest level S-level hunter. I almost drooled at the other person, just now. The male protagonist felt something was wrong when he first entered the Magic Tower because they clearly pressed the elevator button for the 60th floor. They ended up arriving at the 2nd floor. The male protagonist thought the elevator was broken. Then I listened to An Rencheng's explanation. It turns out that this is a test from the union leader. The representative of the Magic Tower is the head of the guild. He is one of the 3 strongest S-level hunters currently, and a weird personality. Any visitor who wants to see him pass the maze test. The Magic Tower itself is a huge maze, so this time they can only find the top floor by themselves. In this case, the male protagonist decided to take the stairs. Things are obviously not that simple. What appeared after the 2nd floor turned out to be an underground parking lot. It turns out that just opening the door, it will link to an unknown space. Just keep going in circles. Seeing this, they had no choice but to go back to the 2nd floor. At this time, the male protagonist asked how many people passed the test. Rencheng said with a cold sweat on his face, "Haven't heard of any. Not only that, I heard that except for a few senior executives, even the staff didn't know. The passage actually allows visitors to pass through empty-handed. Such a complicated maze. It's really bad taste, but I have to say, this maze is really well made." The male protagonist has some expectations. Meet the warlock who made this maze. Because this magic maze, it made him feel a sense of hometown. The two came to the elevator door again, and Rencheng asked the male lead what to do. The male protagonist told him not to worry. He put his hand on the elevator door. Feel it carefully. This body is now a waste, but there are things that can be done. This magical structure is unexpectedly simple. Found the way to the top floor. Hearing this, and Rencheng widened his eyes in disbelief. Really? How do I get there? The male protagonist gave him an answer with practical actions. He first pressed the elevator button, then pressed the top button outside. Finally, exit and wait for the elevator door to close, and signaled An Rencheng to step back. The next moment, the male protagonist took a few steps back. Then, in An Rencheng's shocked eyes, kicked the elevator door. Under great power, the elevator door was kicked down. An empty space appears, and Rencheng watched this scene with a cold sweat on his face. I don't understand why the male protagonist suddenly did this. The male protagonist said calmly, "Let's go." The following is a link to the empty door above. As soon as the words fell, the male protagonist jumped down without hesitation. When he gets down to earth again, already arrived in another space. Of course, and Rencheng also followed, but this feeling is more exciting than jumping off a cliff. It was at this time. Suddenly, a voice came from not far away from them. "I didn't expect you to find this place." Afterwards, I saw a very beautiful red-haired girl turned around. "You are the first in history, the 2 people who cleared my maze the fastest." At this time, Rencheng has been obsessed with the other's beauty. The male lead still has a dead fish eye expression. The other stood up and said, "I didn't expect you guys to find a hidden passage. But your luck ends here, because from now on, it's me you have to face." The representative of the Magic Tower ended. Esther asked the 2 to sit down first. Then let An Rencheng introduce the male lead. He is very interested in the male lead, because ordinary analytical skills simply cannot find his way through the maze. The male protagonist solved it so easily. At the same time, the male protagonist also realized, man who designed the maze. It's just like the rumors. Special personality. He then introduced himself. Esther smiled at the male protagonist. I like strong people. As a person with the same rare attributes, let's get along well. However, as an alien who has just traveled through time, the male protagonist can't understand what the other party is saying. What does the same rare attribute mean? It turns out that Esther mistakenly thought that the male protagonist was awakened. People with analytical skills, such people are quite rare. At the same time, and Ruisheng explained to the male protagonist, Esther, there are only a few curse attribute hunters in the world. Then the male protagonist remembered he seems to have seen other side, an awakener who uses various abnormal states to kill monsters. Magic just appeared in this world. There are few people who can use complex magic. Most of them are like Zheng Ziexin and Zhang Changhao. Fear use of violence. Even defense recovery types like Enrencheng are rare, and identify people with special abilities such as curses and brainwashing. It can only be said that there are very few. Thinking of this, the male protagonist began to talk nonsense. Sorry, I couldn't recognize you. I'm not well informed. Esther couldn't help but cover her mouth and smile. A great appraiser like you. The commission must be full. I've been participating in TV shows recently. End of small talk. Next, let's get to the point. Esther asked Enrencheng, do you want to enter their alien world? Enrencheng, who was suddenly called, quickly replied, yes. But he wasn't the one who actually entered. But male protagonist then explained that Enrencheng was just making an appointment for himself. Because his level is too low, the people in the magic tower ignored him. He took out his ID. Esther was a little surprised. F level, but he was not too surprised. Appraisers are almost like this. Although this is the lowest in the appraisal room. Also, Esther is curious. Why did the male protagonist enter that empty door? If you want to collect the contents, it will make him feel a little embarrassed because the material on that tree wasn't enough even for him. Hearing this, the male protagonist solemnly stated, I will never touch the trees. But even so, Esther couldn't just agree to let the male lead in, because he thought the male lead was the same as Enrencheng. It's from the New Sisters Union. After all, it takes a lot of money to monopolize a 100 million empty door. He's not doing charity. If you really want to go in, you shouldn't have come here by yourself. Instead, let the unions talk to each other. So he reminded the male protagonist not to take advantage. I hate bargaining. Remember to remind your guild. The male protagonist feels that the other party is pretending. It's just a D-level copy. They probably don't even know 1/4 of the good resources out there. But his next words made Esther stunned. Sorry, I don't have a union. At the same time, Enrencheng stood up to testify for the male protagonist. Yeah, don't talk about the union. Big Brother doesn't even have his own team. He always keeps to himself. The male protagonist also spoke up. Although you always call me an appraiser, but I've never done this kind of work. I only know Enruisheng in this circle. A simple sentence almost moved Enrencheng to tears. The male protagonist said, this is just my personal commission. No union will benefit from this. He wanted to give his own conditions. He never thought about it after all. Free entry to someone's empty door. But before he finished speaking, Esther suddenly interrupted. Wait, you mean? I just saw that he was keeping people at a distance. Esther. At this time, even the hair is flying with excitement. He smacked his lips and looked at the male lead, like a hunter seeing the most delicious prey. Thus, the male protagonist was sweating coldly. What's going on? I haven't mentioned the conditions that will make you drool. The woman offered a signing bonus of 500 million yuan. Just to hire the man in front of me. Work 4 days a week and rest 3 days a week. Who would have thought that this guy who can barely afford to eat? I chose to refuse. just because I heard that the male protagonist does not join any guild. Esther, who just looked like a businessman. The case was immediately taken. Why didn't you tell me such an important thing earlier? Come touch the tower. I'll hire you right away. That empty door is nothing. As long as you come, send it directly to you. Hearing this, the male protagonist remained unmoved. In fact, I was already very excited. Wow, pie in the sky really fell. And Rensheng whispered to the male protagonist to explain the original large trade union. The circulation of magic crystals and equipment is very large. They are in urgent need of talent and identification. The male protagonist understood after hearing humans on Earth. There is no way to judge the purity of magic crystal with the naked eye. Don't want to be cheated. It is best to bring an appraiser with you when trading. When the male protagonist was thinking, Ashit suddenly stretched out a hand. Then open your mouth. The signing fee is 500 million. Upon hearing this, the male protagonist was shocked by the other party's generosity. What did you say involuntarily? Esther thought. The new sister guild offered a higher price. For a moment, I wanted to roar to the sky. They have already taken Rensheng away. Why are you trying to snatch the hunter I've chosen? Seeing this, Rensheng, with a cold sweat on his face, advised him to calm down. The male protagonist is thinking that if there are 500 million, how much rice can you eat? Esther calmed down and smoothed her hair. Then it said, they hired a lot of great appraisers. So the workload is not very high. Even though I heard it clearly. But the male protagonist still wants to confirm whether you are really. Do you want me to be an appraiser? Spending 500 million seems promising. Esther was delighted. Of course. The male protagonist is really moved at this moment. No need to explore the empty door. Just sit and identify the equipment and you can make a fortune. I can't wait to agree. Then Esther said happily. The analysis department has a flexible working system. Just work 4 days a week. That's the sentence. Directly shattered the male protagonist's fantasy. Just because of the 2 words work, it touched his sensitive nerves deeply. I was reborn for retirement. Now you let me stamp the contract with my own hand. Run back to work. If you work, you have to work overtime. Say hello to your boss. Also accept annoying complaints. Just think about it. The male protagonist has a deep headache. No, I definitely don't want to go to work anymore. At this time, Ashit has already offered the highest paying contract. Even the V-level hunter Rensheng was surprised when he saw it. Seeing this, Ashit struck while the iron was hot. If you change your mind, we are always welcome. But I didn't notice. At this time, the male protagonist has lowered his head in frustration. Then I heard the male protagonist's deep voice. I'm sorry, I'll just pretend I didn't hear your suggestion. Ashit was shocked when he heard this. How much money do you want? The male protagonist explained that it was not about money at all. I just don't want to join any guild. Esther looked into the other's eyes. I'm sure this is his real thought. Then he changed his face in a second. Really? Since you decided that. But it doesn't matter. Reject my proposal. Want to enter an empty door, but it requires a lot of money. The male protagonist definitely can't come up with this amount of money, but fortunately, he was prepared. I want to make a deal with you. The male protagonist stood up and said, I know a magical substance. Just mix this in. Concrete and metal building. Immune to any skill to a certain extent. And can absorb magic. Even if you are attacked by monsters, you will not fall. He went to the window and continued. The entire magic tower is wrapped in a barrier. The maintenance cost is high. The male protagonist thinks that this is enough as the entrance fee. Esther listened in boredom. Then he spoke coldly. This is certainly enough. But only if the thing is really useful. The male protagonist took out a bag of sand from his body. How much of this do you want? Only I know the location. And Rensheng recognized it at a glance. That's the male lead, the thing I used to deal with the fire bats. But does this sand also have the effect of absorbing magic power? Although it is a bit unreasonable to use this as a condition. But that place is often visited by people. Sooner or later, they will be discovered. It's better to do a favor. Esther picked up the sand and looked at it. I'm curious if this thing really has this effect. Then he looked at the male protagonist and asked, use this valuable information to enter the garbage gate. Have you made this deal with someone else? Hearing this, the male protagonist was speechless. Just now I said that my empty door is worth a lot of money. Now let's talk about the garbage door. Hey woman, the male protagonist asked, do you need to promise not to tell anyone else? And Esther is curious, isn't this a disadvantage for you? While the two were discussing, Esther's assistant served coffee to the group. As for the question just now, the male protagonist said, just as mutual benefit between our rare attributes. In a blink of an eye, the male protagonist and the other two have left. Esther was drinking coffee as usual. But the assistant feels the representative seems a little unhappy. So he asked. Esther said, it's not something unhappy. I just played a joke on a guest. But the assistant was startled. Did he place a curse on the guest just now? Thinking of this, the assistant instantly turned into a mother. You said you wouldn't do this. Esther looked indifferent. It's not some terrible curse. The assistant asked what this time was. Esther happily said she would sneeze for 30 seconds. The assistant felt really bored. But I didn't hear anyone sneeze. That's right, when he used his skill just now. The man was supposed to sneeze. But the other party suddenly looked up at him. At that moment, his eyes were full of murderous intent. Even Esther was frightened by him. He must have found out. Even if you're S-rank, you can't escape your own curse. I don't know where that monster came from. When Esther complained, the results of the identification of the sand left by the male protagonist really has a magic absorbing effect. This kind of thing is given so happily. Assistants speculated the male protagonist wants to leave a good impression on the representative. But Esther thought this was even more terrifying. Then he asked his assistant to bring the male lead's resume. He wants to see, what on earth is that man planning? The scene changes, come to the other side. I saw the male protagonist who was as steady as an old dog. At this time, he was lying on the street corner vomiting, but not because of the curse. It's because of the cup of coffee I drank earlier. I heard that it was a drink prepared for distinguished guests. So he took a sip without any preparation. Then he almost blew it out on the spot. Because this is all alpha physics. The smell of industrial adhesives. What else do you want to give to your distinguished guests? I actually gave you this kind of thing. Then the two of them locked eyes. Just at this time, Esther casts a curse. The result is that the male protagonist is afraid alien of being identity. Seen. Want to vomit, but dare not. Esther mistakenly thought. The other person's eyes were full of murderous intent. Little did they know that the male protagonist's body, it was controlled by Xiaolu through magic. Unless that person's magic is more powerful than this alien. Otherwise, no matter what method, can't take control of this body away. Even if it is the curse of an S-rank hunter. The male protagonist who slowed down. I trembled and bought a bottle of mineral water to rinse my mouth. And Enrencheng. Then he asked about what the male protagonist had just given to Esther. He has never heard. This substance. Not only can it instantly extinguish the flame, Bat's flames can also make buildings stronger. You don't need to think about the value of this thing. But the male protagonist did not hand it over to the association, but to the magic tower. And Rencheng wonders if the male protagonist hates the association. The male protagonist said no. I have no feelings toward the association. He then explained, I just want to leave a good impression on Esther. It was originally a very simple sentence, and Rencheng was shocked after hearing this. He suspected it could be that Esther is the type that the male protagonist likes. Unfortunately, the male protagonist said that he had no feelings for Esther. Oh, that's it. And Rencheng was embarrassed after guessing wrong twice in a row. What are you looking for in that empty door? Why do you do it to this extent? The first time a man is glad that his body is a smoker. People with respiratory problems. Unable to measure magic. Just now. The male protagonist, who was sore all over, stretched and woke up. Then the first time. Just see if the things next to it are dried. This is him and Rencheng yesterday. Enter the empty door that I traded with Esther. Collect it. Materials needed to make magic booster. Fairy monster wings. I thought it would be hard to get. Thanks to and Rencheng for helping. Now that the hardest to find materials have been obtained, then the rest will be much easier. He is trying to regain his previous strength. A big step forward, but let's put these aside for now. There are more important things now. That's to fill your stomach. However, just when he was struggling with what to eat today, suddenly there was a knock on the door. The male protagonist was very confused about this. What's going on? Who is here? Is it the family of this body? If it's someone familiar to the original body, it will be very troublesome. Then with trepidation, the man who opened the door saw a beautiful woman, two big men, and the girl was an old acquaintance of his, Chu and Yuyan from the Hunter Association. The male protagonist is curious about what they want to see him for. Then I learned from Chu and Yuyan. Someone reported him for faking his awakening level. Now you need to go to the Hunter Association for investigation. Hearing this, the male protagonist was shocked. What did you say? At this time, the two big men were already gearing up for a fight. If you don't want to be arrested, better be obedient. The male protagonist looked at them with a cold sweat on his face. It seems that this meal cannot be eaten. Soon, several people got on the car back to the association. Du Yuyan sat alone in the front row, browsing her phone. The male protagonist was sandwiched between two big men. They're not moved. Actually, Du Yuyan had long doubted the male protagonist's level. After all, it's just an F class. How is it possible to defeat the Casino Killer? As for what the other party said about luck, Du Yuyan didn't believe it at all. However, after checking the information, he was even more confused. It's really F level, and the opponent has only one record of entering an empty goal. My resume as a hunter is too simple. Enter F level only once. The guy with an empty door killed the C level monster in one breath. This is ridiculous no matter how you think about it. If Fang Zhen concealed his awakening level, it would be very dangerous. This kind of people usually do things secretly. But Ziyuan has no right to continue investigating the male protagonist, so he reported it directly to his superiors. This matter was originally over. No one at the top took the report seriously. But a few days ago, things took an unexpected turn. Because I left the empty door in a coma, also reported the male protagonist. Unlike Ziyuan, who is just a small civil servant, Zheng Xiaoxin is a national hero. After receiving the reinspection notice, Du Yuyan originally thought that the male protagonist would resist. I didn't expect that he would follow me. And the house he just mentioned was old and dilapidated. Really, not like a place for a high-level hunter to live. Did he hide all the money? Just when Zhu Yuyan was thinking, the male protagonist, who had already changed his clothes, suddenly interrupted him. I want to know how much it costs to retest the awakening value. He can hardly afford to eat. Hearing this, Shu and Yuyan explained that the inspection fee was 480,000 yuan. However, because it is a retest, free if the data does not change. If the data is falsified, not only will you bear the inspection fee, also pay a fine. The male protagonist was still very worried about his situation, but after seeing other people's tests, I feel relieved instantly. If you use this kind of thing to test people with respiratory problems, it is impossible to measure magic power. The male protagonist instantly felt stable. Fortunately, the original body is a smoker. The lungs have already been damaged. That kind of equipment can't detect anything. But his joy didn't last for a few seconds. I felt like I was poured with a basin of cold water. Just because Ziyuan actually told him that there's also the latest equipment, it turns out that the association has already discovered when the tester is used to examine patients with lung diseases, reduced accuracy. A notification has already been issued, but the male protagonist definitely doesn't know. Soon they came to a high in front of technological equipment. At this time, Ziyuan reminded the male protagonist, you have one more chance to correct your level. Hearing this, the male protagonist hurriedly explained whether there was any misunderstanding. However, at this time, No matter how hard he struggled, it was useless. Finally, the male protagonist was pressed on the cold iron bed while screaming. The test results came out soon. The male protagonist sat on the bed nervously waiting for the verdict. Before the announcement, Shu and Yuyin kindly reminded the male protagonist, "You know what the punishment is for falsely reporting your level, right?" The male protagonist listened with cold sweat on his face. He doesn't know. Could it be that the terrible magic of this body? Is he about to be discovered? How will he explain it then? Do I have to confess that I'm an alien? Certainly, more important than this is the 480,000 yuan inspection fee. How could he possibly get it out? Just when the male protagonist was struggling, Du Yuyin has seen the results. Awakening value 14F level. You are not a suspect. Only 2 points higher than last year. This is all normal. Du Yuyin tells the male protagonist not to worry. The male protagonist finally got what he wanted and didn't have to pay. But he's not happy at all. So this body is really only F level. He thought he couldn't cast magic. It's a lung problem. So this body has no magic power at all? No wonder I was in an empty door. Golems only attack Xin Ruisheng without realizing his existence. It turns out that they didn't even consider him as an intruder. Thinking of this, the male protagonist laughed at himself twice. Du Yuyin wondered if he had mental problems. Little did he know that the male protagonist only had one thing on his mind. That means his reincarnation magic failed. And from now on, he wants to be on Earth, live as the weakest magician. The male protagonist left the association in despair. Fortunately, his suspicion has been completely cleared. Du Yuyin is responsible. Send the male lead out. Looking at the male protagonist's state, he asked worriedly, "Do we really not need to go to the hospital?" Need to know. Lower-level awakeners often experience side effects after examination. If you feel uncomfortable, it's best to go see a doctor. However, the male protagonist said no and thanked the other party for his kindness, but he was still almost moved to tears. This earthling is actually worried about himself. But the male protagonist is still a little curious. That is how the other party knew that I was at home today. It turned out that Zhu Yuyin's skill is tracking. Can find the location of objects and people in real time. Zhu Yuyin is explaining. This ability is very suitable for tracking criminals, but was suddenly interrupted by the male protagonist. Then they both widened their eyes in shock. Watching the footsteps, I saw a figure lying in a pool of blood not far away. At this time, the girl was touched by a person's kindness for the first time. But I didn't know that the other person was actually an alien. Just now, Shu and Yuyin, who was walking side by side with the male lead, was startled just because in front of them, suddenly a cyber cat that was hit by a car appeared. He didn't prepare to do anything after he recovered. He's seen this happen a lot. However, the male protagonist's performance shocked him. I saw the other party actually picked up the cyber cat's body. Seeing this, Du Yuyin reminded the male protagonist, "This one's been dead for a while. It's dirty if you touch it directly." However, the male protagonist held her tightly in his arms and said that if it is dirty, just wash it clean. Then the male protagonist stood up and said goodbye to Zhu Yuyin. Du Yuyin looked at the male lead in disbelief, stumbling to say, "Oh, be careful." He thought the male protagonist wanted to bury the cyber cat. I didn't expect him to be so kind. As soon as I saw the other person leaving, this moment, he left an indelible impression on a man. Little did he know that in a place he couldn't see, the male protagonist is almost knocked unconscious by happiness. It's like pie in the sky. I actually found such a good biological specimen. It turns out that there are 2 models on the protagonist's planet. One is a weapon model assembled from rock and metal. Another, it is an organic model made from animal corpses. One sentence explanation is, the male protagonist got an experimental subject. So the male protagonist returned home and started experimenting. But I don't know what happened. The deployment was very unsuccessful. After all, he doesn't have any decent props. It is difficult to control the temperature, humidity, and concentration. Just when the male protagonist had a headache, his cell phone suddenly rang. The male protagonist picked it up impatiently and looked at who is not asleep at 10 o'clock at night and calls him. It's all because of his bad behavior. After returning from the magic tower, I added an identification tag to my introduction. I didn't expect this to be public information. Since then, I have received recruitment calls. The male lead is already tired, so hang up directly. He is so tired now. I don't even bother to respond. Suddenly his phone vibrated again. The male protagonist picked it up and what is this? Then I saw a chocolate ad pop up. It also says I met you at a convenience store. I've never seen these things. I thought it was meant for him. So one person walked toward the convenience store late at night, even though he felt so sleepy now. But when I think about it, this is specially prepared for him. It would be rude not to go and see it. But before he got far, then I found that there was a van blocking the way ahead. The male protagonist walked forward to check. I don't understand why someone would park here. That's really rude. What did not find? There were two people in the car staring at him with ill intentions. Just when the hero turned around and prepared to find another way, a man rushed out of the car. Then there was a sneak attack. The sudden accident puzzled the male protagonist, even though he struggled. But I can't break free. His consciousness gradually fell into a coma. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When he wakes up, already tied up, his eyes were covered with the black cloth. I don't know what the situation is now. At this time, the earth is just a terrible place. I was kidnapped not long after I arrived. Just that. A conversation suddenly came into the male protagonist's ears. Is this guy the S-level one? Yes, we found a chance to capture him. Through their conversation, the male protagonist can analyze that this is not an accident. It was premeditated. As the two continued to chat, their big brother is here. The eldest brother came up and asked the two to salute because the person in front of them is their VIP customer. Then he asked his brothers to check the goods. Customers will see it later. At this point, the male protagonist was shocked to realize that he was a commodity. The male protagonist is another person's product. VIP customers who can see the male protagonist but slowly grinned. Then he reminded several people. The tied guy seems to have woken up. The male protagonist, who obviously didn't move at all. I don't understand why I was exposed. But before he figured it out, the opponent came forward. She tore off the black cloth covering the male protagonist's eyes. A familiar figure appeared in front of the male protagonist. It was the S-level hunter Zhang Changhao. Zhang Changhao spoke with interest. Long time no see. Seeing that the male protagonist seems to have not figured out the situation, Zhang Changhao kindly explained to him. It turns out that he broke the magic tower maze. So I'm very famous in the circle recently. What? This senior appraiser's hunter level is S level. So the fighting power is so weak, but the male protagonist has such high identification skills. Naturally, they became the target of criminals. The fate of the male protagonist is also easy to guess. Sold to rich people. As a private appraiser, after all, there are many people who don't want to be known. What advanced equipment do you have? The fees charged by appraisers are usually very high, but as a slave, the maintenance cost is much cheaper. And people below level D are easily brainwashed. Very convenient to use. Zhang Changhao said that he had done so before. That's why I became a VIP guest here. After explaining, Zhang Changhao walked away from the male protagonist mercilessly. My male protagonist hurriedly asked the other party if he was willing to help. However, Zhang Changhao said that he was a guest. He has something else. Just wave goodbye. Looking at the arrogant kidnapper in front of him, the male protagonist regrets. He started. I shouldn't have been born into this damn world. Soon the male protagonist was thrown to the second floor by the room is closed. Make room for the next item. At this time, one of them reminded that the guy hadn't been blindfolded yet. Another person said it doesn't matter. He must have fallen asleep anyway. After saying that, the door slowly closed. However, in their eyes, the male protagonist who should have been asleep opened his eyes. The male protagonist doesn't understand. Why did they leave themselves here alone? Are you planning to sell yourself out right away? And while he was thinking, suddenly, a faint floral scent entered his nose. Following the direction of this fragrance, at first glance, I saw a special magic item. It is quietly placed on the table. This is a prop that makes people sleep. Even B-level awakeners are not immune. However, for the male protagonist, a great magician, it's useless. Of course, it doesn't matter. The important thing is to escape from here first. The male protagonist struggled to untie his shoelaces and bite one end, step on one end. He began to rub the bandages covering his hands like crazy. Ultimately, hard work pays off. He successfully freed his hands. Next steps, the first thing the man did was to call the police. After all, even if you are immune to brainwashing, being sold is still very dangerous. But he searched for a long time and found that there was no mobile phone. It's normal to think about it. How could the kidnappers make such a mistake? At this time, the male protagonist couldn't help but look aside. A magic item that can make people unconscious. Then go up and pick it up. Really? This is the only thing you can use if you want to escape. The man just had a leg disease. Have you ever seen me run? Who would have thought that he could successfully scare an S-level hunter? Not long ago, the unlucky male protagonist was kidnapped. The kidnappers took it with a hypnotic magic item. Locked in a room. At this time, two younger brothers were guarding outside a passage. The two of them had nothing to do. But suddenly I felt something. Suddenly looking back. As a result, I saw a golden glow rising behind me. At the same time, a fragrance came out. Seeing this, the two of them quickly covered their mouths and noses and waited for the battle. Before they figured out what happened, suddenly, something like a meteor hammer hit one of them hard in the face. At this time, the other person finally realized something. Too bad it's too late. A strong sense of sleepiness swept over his whole body. Then the male protagonist walked out of the door carrying the magic props. Have to say, this thing is pretty useful. Fear of being discovered. The male protagonist is ready to find an exit immediately. And just at this moment, his foot suddenly kicked something. Then down and take a look. It's a cell phone. I'm so lucky. The man immediately pressed the emergency call number to call the police. The call was connected soon. A voice came from the other side. Ask what happened. Upon hearing this, the male protagonist immediately said that he was kidnapped. Request for help. However, the other side seemed to hear nothing. Keep asking him to speak louder. But no matter how the male protagonist improves, the sound is the same. This made the male protagonist doubt. Is this phone broken? Since the phone call is not working, then texting should be fine, right? SMS sent successfully. But the response is very mechanical. Received. It may take a while to arrive. Emergency. Please dial 112. Send another one. Still this result. This made the male protagonist a little uneasy. Did the other party receive my text message? Just in case. He sent another text message to Enrui Shang. Then he picked up the magic props and started his escape journey. At this time, there are two other traffickers patrolling this floor. But they suddenly found something wrong. Why is it foggy ahead? At the same time, a yellow-haired man walked out from the bush. Who is this? Is there anyone with dyed hair among them? But the hero doesn't wait for them to figure it out. Then he turned the magic tool like a meteor hammer again. Then he threw it towards one of them. The next second, the man was slapped in the face. This accuracy is indeed. Then another person reacted. This guy is the awakened one they kidnapped. But it's too late. The hero who retrieves the magic tool through the chain, press it directly on the other person's face. Another double kill achievement. The magic props are really useful for hitting the face. Next, we need to find an exit and escape as soon as possible. But in this building with windows blocked off, it's a bit difficult. And just at this time, the male protagonist was suddenly startled because he felt a huge magical force came from behind. This feels like an empty door. I think that a Buddhist temple is usually located in the mountains or open space outdoors. The male protagonist decided to use him as a signpost to escape, but before he made any move, a group of people appeared behind him. It seems that the escape was exposed. The male protagonist hurriedly ran down the stairs to the next floor. Unexpectedly, at this critical moment, his legs suddenly began to throb violently. This made the male protagonist break out in a cold sweat. Damn, I haven't even started running yet. And that is the time of this moment. The people behind me have caught up with me. They pointed at the male protagonist angrily. A mere F-class dares to run away. It's really asking for death. However, when they saw what the male protagonist was holding, another look of horror, they quickly stopped breathing. The male protagonist said that it was too late to realize it now. Then he threw the magic item like a meteor hammer again, but this time the male protagonist miscalculated. One of them is of higher rank. Directly take it with one hand, then he rushed toward the male protagonist. The other hand pressed the male protagonist against the wall. At this time, he no longer cares about what he can do with the goods. The rules are to teach the male protagonist a lesson. Who would have thought that the male protagonist would grab the other person's arm? Then he kneeled hard on the opponent's chin. The man rolled his eyes on the spot. Then he fell straight back to the ground, looking at the knocked out guy and the other guys who were knocked unconscious. The male protagonist couldn't help but sigh that he was so fucking tired. The male protagonist, after taking a break, picked up magic items from the ground. Then I realized something was wrong. Because the magic power of the magic item has been used up. It will be troublesome if we are caught again. And just at this time, the male protagonist suddenly found a door behind him. The huge magic power comes from behind the door. There is an empty door behind this door. It must be export. Finally saw the hero of hope, throwing away the useless magic tools. Trembling, I walked toward the door. Luckily it wasn't locked. Pushed the door open with excitement. The scene before him made him dumbfounded. Jiang Changhao and a group of people appeared in front of him. What's going on? How to make an empty door indoors, and with Jiang Changhao. Finished. The boss was very angry when he saw the goods running away. He angrily scolded his younger brother for how he managed. The younger brother, who was scolded, questioned the male protagonist. How come you are here? What did you do to the people above? Could it be that one person solved so many problems? You guys are not lying about your level, are you? Seeing that the other party did not discover me, use magic items to knock those people out. The male protagonist was originally planning to bluff and escape. Unfortunately, with Jiang Changhao present, it was destined not to work. And what's worse is, boss of a human trafficking gang, shamelessly asking Jiang Changhao to help. The male protagonist just wants to despise the other party. I don't think VIP will help you. Who would have thought that Jiang Changhao would actually grin? I just agreed. As a thank you, the boss said he could sell the male lead to Jiang Changhao at a low price. Then Jiang Changhao walked in front of the male protagonist. Did you hear me? He said he sold you cheaply. Are you going to run away now? There's a road behind. If you run away, desperately, I'll let you go. However, the male protagonist's next words made the other party stunned on the spot. Jiang Changhao, have you ever seen me run? Hearing this, Jiang Changhao looked at the other party seriously. Not once. This is the most tragic space awakener. He was offline within 30 seconds of appearing. Just now. The male lead asked, have you ever seen me run? Shocked, Jiang Changhao responded. Jiang Changhao looked at the other party with fighting spirit. So, let's compete here. Who would have thought that the male protagonist would just raise his hands and surrender? No, I don't think we need to fight here. Hearing this, Jiang Changhao looked down at the male lead. You knocked out everyone on top. Val here? How do you want me to believe your surrender? The other party's concerned. That's right, even if it was the male protagonist, he wouldn't believe it easily. Just when the male protagonist was thinking about what to do next, suddenly, I felt a magical force coming. He and Jiang Changhao turned their heads to look to the side at the same time. Result! I saw a man walking out of a space passage. The male protagonist thought it was an empty door at first. But think about it, it's wrong. Not an empty door, it's a magic channel. It is a spatial movement skill. The newcomers came forward to greet their boss. At this time, Jiang Changhao stepped forward and asked, "Is this the porter?" The boss proudly introduced Jiang Changhao. He has the ability to move people around, a rare warlock. Jiang Changhao grinned when he heard this. "I didn't expect to see the real me." The boss also introduced Jiang Changhao to the movers. Several people were chatting happily. The male protagonist, who was suddenly neglected. "I was thinking of taking this opportunity to escape." Who would have thought that Jiang Changhao would suddenly pick up? When the porter was about to shake his hand, he punched the opponent's neck with all his strength. Blasted away directly. The sudden scene shocked the male protagonist, the boss of the human trafficking organization. He even asked Jiang Changhao with an ugly face what he was doing. However, Jiang Changhao, who was very enthusiastic at this time, he looked at the few people like ants. Turned out to be his goal all along was to kill this guy, spend a lot of time on this, gain the trust of these people. After all, the space awakeners are too slippery, run away at the slightest sign of trouble. It's hard to find opportunities. As the saying goes, a strategist who puts himself in the game wins half the battle. Jiang Changhao won this round. The male protagonist looked at this scene with confusion. "I don't understand what happened." Actually, Jiang Changhao doesn't care that these guys are smuggling or illegally occupying an empty door, but these people smuggled the awakened overseas. That's another matter. The younger brother realized that something was wrong, remind the boss to escape quickly through the space gate. However, in response, Changhao punched him mercilessly. The male protagonist watched calmly from the side. No one can stop this guy. S rank is not for nothing. In the beginning, the Hunter Association only stipulates that the levels are from S to A. But suddenly one day, one after another, a hunter with a terrifying power far beyond level 1 appeared. This superstandard grade was eventually classified as S grade. Without a doubt, they are at the top of the food chain. In just a blink of an eye, the only person still awake in the human trafficking organization is the boss. He trembled and begged Jiang Changhao to let him go. However, Jiang Changhao is not a kind man. How could we agree to such a ridiculous request? Listening to the screams coming from the side, the male protagonist once again realized that he shouldn't have contradicted this guy. Just that, the male lead and Jiang Changhao were suddenly startled because a siren sounded from outside. Policeman Jiang Changhao looked at the male protagonist in panic. "You called the police." The male protagonist suddenly remembered that this was the case, so he nodded in agreement. Jiang Changhao was incredulous when he heard this. "It seems like I saw something incredible." Social affairs. "You called the police." The male protagonist has no idea what the problem is. Jiang Changhao soon calmed down. He explained that he was here just to stop this. These guys sell the awakened ones abroad. Remind the male protagonist, "Don't get yourself mixed up with this organization." Hearing this, the male protagonist said that this is what the police should do. Hear the word police. Jiang Changhao was very dissatisfied. "You don't know how slow these guys are. In general, even if you call the police, it will take at least a few days to find a place. I don't know why it's so fast this time." Jiang Changhao thought the male lead had done something in advance, although he was curious. But now is not the time to say more. He patted the male lead on the shoulder. Then he pushed the door open and left without looking back. Seeing this, the male protagonist was shocked. Let him wait. But Jiang Changhao seemed to have heard nothing. The male protagonist secretly cursed. How could he explain this situation to the police alone? Soon a large number of police rushed in. Then they made the male protagonist the first suspect. Take control on the spot. Then warned the male protagonist not to use his ability, and asked where the hostages were. Although the male protagonist explained that he was the reporter, but they don't believe it at all. The male protagonist was speechless about this. Is it really okay to treat kind aliens like this? At this critical moment, an angelic voice suddenly came into the male protagonist's ears. Wait, just see. Ms. Su Yuyin ran in, panting. Looking at the captured male protagonist, Su Yuyin came forward to prove that it was indeed him who called the police. The police had no suspicions this time. I believed him directly, uncuffed the male protagonist and apologized. The male protagonist just wants to shout, didn't I say that? But the male protagonist is very curious about why Su Yuyin is here. Su Yuyin raised her phone to show the other party. It turns out that Emran Chang received the male protagonist's text message for help. He is on his way to suppress the riot in the dungeon. No time for splitting, so I handed this matter over to Su Yuyin. Then Su Yuyin passed his tracking skills found here. No wonder the police came so quickly. As Su Yuyin explained, a loud shout suddenly came from the side. It turned out that the police discovered through comparison. These people are wanted human traffickers. It's the one that's been popular recently. Organizations that sell awakened people overseas. This seems to be their meeting place. Hearing this, Shu and Yuyin was shocked. He's heard that this organization is very difficult to track down. Now this organization seems to be almost destroyed. At this time, the police captain came forward and asked the male protagonist, "Did you do all this?" The male protagonist denied that it was not me. It was all done by that madman Zhang Changhao. The captain was in disbelief when he heard this. There are so many people lying on it. Wasn't it you who did it? The male protagonist was sweating coldly. Those were what I did. The captain asked the male protagonist to explain clearly. The male protagonist had no choice but to tell the truth. He looked indifferent. I do all this to protect myself. At this time, another policeman picked up the magic tool that the male protagonist threw away. Ask if it's the male lead. Su Yuyin fell into deep thought. Back to the point. This guy wasn't tied up. And it appears in the boss room. Plus, he's the reporter. Looking at the other person's body without any wounds. Even though it was almost sold overseas, still aloof attitude, Su Yuyin couldn't help but doubt. Was he really kidnapped? All of this. Was it all part of his plan from the beginning to the end? Ma finally used the first magic since coming to Earth. The first thing he did is to restore your own lame human trafficker. End of event. The male protagonist, as a meat ticket, successfully sent the entire organization in. He also gained a lot of benefits. I got a B-level hypnotic magic item for nothing. Investigate. The reason is that the police don't know the effect of this thing. Mistakenly thought the male protagonist was his owner. This type of magic item is rare. And it can be recharged. The male protagonist is very satisfied with this. Although because of Jian Changhao's escape, he had to deal with the police's statement alone. But it's all worth it. The only regret is, this thing can only be used on humans. Has no effect on animals or monsters. Just then, with a sound of beeping, the male protagonist looked back excitedly. A stream of green steam came out of the kettle. He hurried up to turn off the gas stove. Then with excitement, pour boiling water directly into the cup. Success! It's the perfect color. He admired his work carefully. I didn't expect that on this remote planet. Can also make this. I am indeed a genius. It turned out that this green thing is a magic booster. Just drink it to temporarily increase your magic power. Like the flint of a lighter, can provide initial energy. The male protagonist picked up the cup and drank it all. Then I carefully felt the changes in my body. Very good. Breathing is very smooth, although the effect of this potion can only last for 5 minutes. But it's enough to complete a warlock. Then the male protagonist used the first magic after coming to Earth. He first recovered from his right leg disease. Then he cast a spell to keep the body healthy and inhibit aging. The magic ends. The male protagonist jumped up and down excitedly. It really doesn't hurt at all. But it's too early to be happy now. Because he just confirmed one thing. That is, the magic power of this body is really rubbish. just used a low-level magic. Use up the magic. This body's magic power conversion efficiency is too low. Amplitude mirrors cannot be used frequently, but think positively. At least this time it succeeded, isn't it? When people are happy, they feel refreshed. We should eat something to celebrate. The male protagonist is about to check what is left in the refrigerator. Then suddenly, there was a knock on the door. He originally thought it was Xu and Yuyan again. Who would have thought that when he opened the door, he would see an old man? Through the memory of the original body, the male protagonist recalled that this was the landlord. He hurriedly greeted the old man. The old man first apologized for the intrusion. Then he asked the male protagonist in a friendly manner, "Haven't you paid the rent this month?" It turns out that the original owner hasn't paid the rent for more than 3 months. The total amount owed was 1.35 million won. If you add in water, electricity, property, and other messy things, at least 2 million is required. Even so, the old man actually let the male protagonist stay until
If you really can't
pay, you can cancel the lease. I have never seen such a good landlord in my life. Fortunately, I once encountered a full return of the deposit. Almost touch. The male protagonist who sent away the landlord, he returned to his room with a sad face. Damn, he's going to end up on the streets soon. Only 14 days left until the end of the month. Is there any way to make money? It's better to be buried in the soil and forgotten to dig it up. Think of this. A sudden flash of inspiration came to the male protagonist. He lunged for his phone. Yes, there is also that. Then he called John Changhao. He wants to get his compensation back. John Changhao, who was enjoying a big meal, received a call from the male lead. It took me a while to remember the traffic accident. Then he didn't say anything nonsense. Asked the man directly how much money he needs. Hearing this, the male protagonist checked the internet. I saw someone say start with 300. Think again, he needs 2 million. And the other party still owes me a lot. It shouldn't be a big deal to ask for more. John Changhao, who has not heard a reply, said, "If you don't say it again, I'm hanging up." Hearing this, the male protagonist hurriedly asked nervously if 3 million was okay. At this moment, John Changhao felt that he was being looked down upon. Only 3 million? You asked me if I could. He hung up the phone. I immediately transferred 3 million to the other party. The male protagonist excitedly looked at the receipt prompt. It's so easy to get such a large sum of money. But he soon calmed down again, because there's not much left after paying the rent. Thinking of this, the male protagonist couldn't help but shed tears. Are there any ordinary people? Ways to make money quickly? Just then, a phone call came in. The male lead is Amrun Chang. I haven't thanked you for what happened before. Did you contact me first because you were worried? The male protagonist is about to answer the phone. Suddenly, I thought of an important thing. Like a level A hunter, the next copy will earn hundreds of billions. The male protagonist who thought of ways to make money. Decisive meeting with Anrun Sheng. First, he thanked Anrun Sheng for contacting Xu and Yuyan to save his life. As a thank you, the male protagonist said he wanted to treat Anrun Sheng to a meal. I heard that my elder brother invited me. Anrun Sheng is very excited. Then, in order to save money for the male lead, he only ordered 1 cup of coffee. The male protagonist readily agreed. In fact, I am full of complaints in my heart. You might as well have dinner with me. Now he wants to vomit when he smells coffee. Then Emren Cheng ordered a cup of iced coffee. The male protagonist asked for a latte and emphasized that only latte, not coffee. Don't add anything coffee flavored. And Rencheng was confused when he heard this. The waiter said in a cold sweat, "Do your best." The male protagonist is not sure
Looking
why.
at
The strange reactions of the 2 people around me. What's wrong? Have I revealed my alien side? Final. The male protagonist drank the latte without coffee as he wished. The 2 chatted for a while to lighten up the atmosphere. Then the male protagonist started to get straight to the point. Rencheng, you seem to be only doing suppression recently. This riots. Except for the few times with me. How long has it been since you entered an empty door? Here. And Rencheng began to stutter and was unable to speak. The male protagonist looked at the other person seriously. Are you really afraid of entering an empty door?